All right, so we're going to start off the workflow by creating a new order here in 3Shape. That's what I use for all of my design needs. It does a great job, has a lot of neat features to it. So that's what we'll use here. So I'm going to go up to the top left and create a new order. And then I'm going to first enter in my patient information here. So I like to put in, patient first, last name, things like that. Since this isn't a real case, I'm going to use Printed Flexible RPD as my name there. And then I also have this reference field enabled. That's something that you can do in the control panel if you want to do that. But I use it for a lot of different things. So for this particular case, I'm going to use it for shades. So we're going to do A2 for the teeth. We're going to do light pink for the base. And then I like to also tell it here if this is a try-in or a final. So this will be a final. Now I'm going to come over here to my tooth chart and I'm going to select the teeth that we're going to do on this case. So I'm going to hold the control key down and just select each individual tooth. So now that I've got those selected, I'm going to go here to gingiva first, and it should default to my denture base, which is what I want, and the correct material. Now, if it doesn't, you can go over to the plus symbol, start typing in the name of your material that you want to use. In this case, we're using the Detax Flexible, and select it there. But I have mine set to default to this material, so that's why it pops right up. Then I'm going to go to Anatomy, and we're going to use the Detax crown material as our tooth material here. So again, this is at the top of my list, so that's what it defaults to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and click in the gray space, and then I'm going to select these two teeth over here, bridge them together, so that'll be one of my tooth segments. And then I'm going to select my other 4 teeth here and bridge them together. This is going to make the whole process much easier for us where we're not having to put individual teeth into a base. We can put tooth bridges into a base, which will help us maintain the occlusion a lot better. So that's what you want to use here. When you look at the object type up here at the top right, if you're doing, your lab desktop scanner, you're going to use the model option if you're scanning in stone models, or the impression option if you're scanning in impressions. However, I don't recommend scanning in impressions for partials just because it's really hard for the scanner to get down into the pockets where the teeth are, the existing teeth. So I always just pour mine up and scan the models back in that way. Then you have digital impression. You'll use that for anything that you're going to do from a intraoral scanner. It doesn't matter what kind of scan it is. You'll always want to make sure that it's set for digital impression because it controls how the workflow goes. So I'm going to select model here because that's where my scans are coming from. And then normally what I would do is I would go ahead and hit scan here and go right into the scanning workflow, but we're not going to go over the scanning in this video, so I'm going to select OK here. Once I do that, you'll see my case populates here in my main dental system, dental manager here. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go to import scans. If you're entering in cases ahead of time and you're going to go scan them, then you would go to scan. So I'm going to import scans here. And then I'm going to go and navigate to where my scans are held. So I've got mine down here. You're going to need 3 scans. Typically, you're going to need a upper, lower, and a wax rim. Now, if you don't have a wax rim, for example, like I don't here, that's fine. You don't need one. You can always just re-import one of the scans. So typically, when I don't have a wax rim, I re-import the prep scan. Just make sure that the scans that you've got are already aligned in the bite orientation. If they're not, then you have to have that wax rim and you have to be able to manually align them. So I'm going to go ahead and it's asking for the lower jaw here. So I'm going to grab the prep arch and hit open. And then now it wants the opposing. So I'm going to grab that, hit open. And then again, for the wax rim, I'm just going to grab the opposing again since it's the upper. And now we're going to go into the design. All right, so once you've opened your design here, it's going to start you off in the model analysis step. With models, that's typically okay as long as there are no issues and pulls and things like that in the scan itself. This scan looks fine. So, if they have voids or something in their impression material, that's going to show up here. So you would go back to the prepare step and fix those. We're not going to do that in this video, but what we are going to do is we're going to start off here in model analysis and we're going to define our occlusal plane. So in order to do that, you just want to click 3 points. So I'm going to start here and click. And I'm going to go to right where the midline is. And then I'm going to go to the opposite side cusp that I clicked on first. It's really important to make sure that your second point is right on the midline. Otherwise, this horizontal and vertical planes will be rotated to one side or the other, and they won't be lined up in the middle. So when I move my view around here, you can see that I've got my plane of teeth here, and it's behind the plane of teeth of the patient. So I want to move this forward. And I want to get it positioned right where the upper teeth are. So I want to get this right on where I want my occlusal plane, and I want to make sure that it's even across both sides. Lift this side up a little bit, and that vertical plane goes right through where the midline is. Now, if you have a palette, you can also use the incisive papilla and the center of the palette to define out where this plane should go. Since we don't have that, we're just kind of guessing based off of the midline. So this looks fine. This is going to set the initial position of our teeth. So we want to make sure that it's at least close to where we want it. So I'm going to go ahead and select next. And now we're going to define out our characteristic points. Now, if you were doing an upper and a lower together, then you would have to define out the maxillary and mandibular points. Since we're only doing a lower, that's why we only have to define out the mandibular points. So in order to do this, we're going to come in here and we're going to click on the center of the retromolar pad. Then we're going to click on the same side, the buccal and lingual points here. It's really important you get all three of those number ones on one side or the other. Doesn't matter which side you start with. You just want them on one side or the other. And then you're going to do your center ridge point. So I usually go, when I have teeth here, I'll usually go ahead and place it about right in between the centrals on the lingual side. Now I'm going to go to my opposite side retromolar pad, and I'm going to click the center, buccal, and lingual points. You want to make sure that you're not just looking at everything from an occlusal view when you do these. You want to look dead straight on with the retromolar pad itself. Otherwise, you'll get these points in the wrong spots. And then last, you're going to place your 2 canine points. They should go to the distal of the canines. Now, if you don't have teeth there, you're going to have to kind of guess, but that's generally where they should go, is the distal of the canines. So your points should look like this. You'll want to notice that over here on the left, everything is now bolded. And then on the actual scan here, we've got color codes. So these dark blue points are your center of your retromolar pad. The light blue points are either the buccal or lingual points of both retromolar pads. Your canine points are red, and then your center ridge point is green. And that corresponds to the upper as well. So on the upper, the tuberosities are blue, the canine points are red, and the incisive papilla point is the green. So they all kind of match up. It's a visual indicator to help you know if you've got all the points in the right spots or not. So we're going to go next, and now we're going to define out our boundary. Now, this is different from if you've used the RPD module in 3Shape. You're not going to, do this in stages where you pick like your saddle areas and your major connector and your clasps and rests and all that. You're going to design this all in one shot. So you have to make sure that as you design this, that you design every piece of it that you want in this partial in one outline. So I'm going to click the outline button here, and we're just going to go around and start placing where we want this outline to go. So I like to do, for flexibles, I like to do smaller clasping top to bottom, just because I need those to be flexible. It's really important that they are. I also will overextend back here a little bit just to make sure that I have full saddles for where my teeth are going to go. If I overextend it too much, I'll be able to adjust that later on. And then I'm just going to go kind of work my way around. And I'm just kind of picturing in my mind the overall way that this partial should look. So I'm just going to visualize that, I'm going up now over this side, and then I'm going to come back down, and I'm going to start the beginning of this clasp that's going to go around this tooth. My saddles are going to come up, and then I'm going to come up here like this, go up into my inner proximal a little bit, and then I'm going to start coming around the tooth. I'm really trying to get into those interproximals and those undercuts of the teeth and everything like that. So I really want to get in here. I know that these are flexible, but they need that retentive area for support to hold them in place, especially on cases like this with these free end saddles. They're really prone to, the flexibility and the bouncing and things like that. So we want to make sure that we get those correct. Now you can see I made a mistake here, so I'm going to go in here and fix it. So I'm going to right click on the outline, and I'm going to go to this fast edit line, and I'm going to start redrawing it. What happened was I double clicked, and it finished out the outline on me. So I didn't want that quite yet, so I'm going to just go around here and just finish up where I actually wanted the outline. So I'm going to have to redraw this clasp. And then now I can make my additional adjustments. So if I want to bring this up the tooth a little bit more here in the front, I can. If I bring this down just a little bit, there. So that's probably where I'm going to leave it there. All right, so now that looks pretty good. I want to make sure that I hug really tightly into these interproximals, like I said. So I'm going to just make sure that I'm up in there to get my retention that I want. There we go. So I'm happy with that for now. We'll come back and check it here in a bit once we actually place the teeth in. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next now. And then this is going to take us to our survey and blockout step. So due to this being a flexible partial, I really don't want to block anything out. What'll end up happening is I'll take away too much retention. And if I properly place this initial insertion direction here, it will show you that, there's not really much in the way of super deep undercuts here. So I want to make sure that I don't block any of these out so that I can keep it as retentive as possible. In order to do that, I'm going to make sure none is selected here under settings, and then I'm going to go next. If you have to add any blockout wax manually, this is where you're going to do it. You'll use the add, subtract, and smooth tools to do that. Again, I'm not going to add anything here, so I'm going to go next. Okay, so that's going to give me my tooth libraries. You're free to use whatever libraries you want. You can see here I've got a whole bunch of different ones that I can use. Um, just be careful, when you select certain ones, you may not be able to use them. Um, so when I selected, for example, the Finars, when it loads here, I may get an error saying that I don't have licensing for it, or I won't be able to produce the output that I want uh, because of my licensing on my dongle. So just be careful with those kinds of things. Um, when you're selecting your tooth, you want to make sure that you get no errors when you select them. That way you know that you're going to be able to produce those teeth. All right, so I've got the tooth that I want to use here, and if I hit apply, you'll notice that you get this here. You just have to be really careful when you use things like this, because what'll happen is that this library won't allow you to produce the teeth. It's not going to give you the tooth files in your folders because you don't have the licensing for it. So I would select no here and then just come in here and choose a different library. I'm going to grab the dense supply library here and use it instead. That way, I have a library I know I can produce because I have the licensing for this one. And then we will go ahead and set the teeth. All right, so you can see I've hit apply here and it's added the teeth in here. So I just need to move them into position. So I'm going to minimize this box here at the bottom. Over on the right-hand most side of the screen, there is a minimize arrow there. So I'll select that. And then I'm going to go ahead and start moving my teeth into position. So I always use, under the design tools, I always use the leftmost tool first to rough position everything. And then once I get it kind of rough positioned in here, then I will move on to smaller tools. So we're going to position those in there. Um, And this tool will allow me to do all the teeth at one time, so you can see how they're all moving together. The blue controls will move them in a straight line in whatever direction you pull from that blue point. Everything is view dependent, so as I rotate my view here, you'll notice that the arrows and control points all change. The red ones are a rotation option, and then the green ones are the ones that resize. So I've got these rough positioned here, kind of where I want them with this tool. So now I'm going to move into this other tool here, this middle one. I don't like this tool. It just has a lot of issues with it, so I don't tend to use it, but I like this middle one. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to drag this tooth segment back. And I like to get them to the point where they're just not touching the adjacent tooth. So you can see here on this bicuspid that I'm close to it, but I'm not touching it. If I make that contact super heavy, what's going to end up happening is I'm not going to have draw on the partial. So I'm trying to minimize the amount of issues that I could have later on with the partial. So I'll move it by grabbing the first tooth in the segment, and I'll position it. And then if I grab the last tooth in the segment, I can tip and tilt them in and out. So I can really get those positioned in the bite the way that they're supposed to be. If I change my view, I can move them up and down a little bit. And then I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same thing. So I'm going to bring these forward enough to where they're almost touching, but I've got them slightly out. So you can see I'm slightly not touching there. And then I can rotate the segments in and out, trying to get them close to the right position. Once I get them rough positioned where I want them, then I'm going to move into the individual setup tool. And this is going to allow me to do individual movements of the teeth. So I'll click on one and then I can go ahead and do my rotation, kind of the same tools as the group transformation tool. It's just on individual teeth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm in the right occlusal relationship with all the teeth. If I right click on a tooth, I get a right click menu here. I'm going to use these bring to options to make sure that I have interproximal contact between the teeth. So this tooth looks like it's a little far out for me. So I'm going to bring it in, bring it to mesial contact. I also feel like it might be slightly tipped downward at the mesial, so I'll bring that up. Okay. So I feel like this side's good now, so let's fine tune this side. That actually looks pretty good. So now that I've got them really, really close to where I want everything, I'm going to do one more thing. That's going to be the morphing tool. And so I'm going to use these sliders up here at the top right to turn some things off. So I'm going to turn off my opposing and that plane that was up so I can see the occlusion of my teeth. And then I'm going to turn on the occlusal map slider. This is going to help me really fine tune my occlusion. So what this is showing me is the colors are all distances from the opposing. Red being the closest. Blue is actually an over contact or heavy contact. So we need to adjust those teeth especially. So you can do that. I usually do it with two tools. So I use the individual setup tool and I use the morphing tool to do that. So if I see a large amount of blue, a lot of times I'll slightly move it out of occlusion a little bit more just to reduce it down. And then I'll look at maybe it's a little, in the wrong position just slightly. So just trying to get it positioned in the right ballpark here. And then the other thing I can do is look at this tooth and I can see that it might be also slightly tipped down at the mesial. So I'll rotate that up and I'll slide it back forward. I'll lift it up a little bit, get those contact points in there. Bring this one back to the mesial contact so they're touching each other. And then I'll take a look. And I really like the way that this one looks now. This one needs some work. So I'm going to go and switch over to the morphing tool and I'm going to push it down. To get the black arrows here, I'm holding the control key down on the keyboard. And you can see I'm starting to get rid of a lot of this blue. I don't want to get rid of all of it because what I'm going to do later on is I'm going to equilibrate the bite to try to get it, just a little bit better into contact there. So, but you can see the difference from this side now to this side. So I'm going to do the same thing on that last molar over here because it's a little high. Bring it down. And I'm probably going to take a look at the bite again here. Might slide it back just a hair. And then I'll continue to work on the overall position of it. That looks a lot better. Just take a look here. Looks pretty good. Still over the ridge, which is what I want to see. Might actually swing this forward just a little bit. Keep me from being too far off the lingual there. And then now when I look at it, I'm going to come in here and start pulling these blue points just a little bit. I want to leave a little bit, but not a lot, so that I can equilibrate these teeth in a little. All right, so I've got those all fairly close to equilibrated. One of the things I really like about doing these digitally is now, if you take a look at the tooth anatomy, it doesn't even look like I touched anything on the occlusion. So they all still have all their nice occlusion intact, which is really great. When you do traditional dentures or in traditional partials, to get those teeth to really occlude well, you have to grind down the occlusion a little bit, especially in the cusp areas, and then you end up with a lot of these flat spots. With these don't even look like they're touched, but we have really pretty close occlusal relationships here without being, super heavy. The next thing we're going to do is I always make sure I turn off the occlusal map because it does take up a lot of system resources. So if I open up what I'm going to open next, it sometimes will crash out your software. So I'm going to go over here to the right and I'm going to grab this articulator. It's called the virtual articulator. We're going to open that up. We're going to position this so that, think of this as like we're mounting on a mounting table. So I'm going to position this right where that occlusal of those teeth are. This actually looks really good. The silhouette of teeth on here, these are all generic, so they don't match every arch. So you don't really need to really focus on those, but I always make sure that my midline is right in the midline of that table. And then I also make sure that I'm kind of balanced out on both sides. So if I'm off, sometimes what will happen is on one side, I'll be closer to the condyle than the other, so I'll get weird functional marks and things like that. So I want to make sure I'm as close as I possibly can be. This is, this is about as good as I can get with it. There are some coist transfers and things that you can get into to do this to where it mounts, perfectly to the articulator, but we aren't going to get into that now. I will show you here this opening incisal pin. This will allow you to open or close the bite. So anything positive is going to open, anything negative is going to close it. So you can put in those values here, and then you just want to make sure you lock it, and that will open or close the bite. And it is a true articulated opening and closing. It's on a hinge, so it's not just straight apart. It does open it. You also have condylar settings here that you can adjust. If you mounted this on a full semi-adjustable articulator or full adjustable articulator, you can pull those values off of those articulators and plug them in here, and you can get kind of the same functional movement. I'm going to go up here to the box and go into the articulator icon here. I'm going to make sure all three of these check boxes are checked off. That's really important that you have guided by incisal plate turned on because otherwise it will overclose the bite as you adjust it. So you may adjust it too much and end up super overclosed, and then you won't know it until after you've produced it and it's too late. So just make sure you have all of these checked off. And there's a couple ways that you can run this. You can either hit this play button here, and it will just run through one functional movement here of um, the articulation, and it will mark everything in blue, which is fine. Some people do it this way, and you know, there's not too much issue with it. If you're really trying to get into getting good functional occlusion, though, you don't really want to do it this way, because as soon as I um, do this, I've run through both lateral excursions, protrusive and retrusive, and it's marked everything the same color. So um, that tends to be an issue. So what I like to do is I'll come in here and I'll have my articulator on, I'll have both arches turned on, and then I'll use these hand icons here to help me guide it. So right now you can see the only hand that's turned on is this lateral and mesiotrusion. So I'm going to left click and grab the incisal pin, and I'm going to drag it over to one side, and I'm going to look for functional movement. Now, you have to kind of take this with a grain of salt, because again, there's a lot of natural teeth here. And we all know that, most patients who get partials don't have perfect occlusion. So, we're not always going to get perfectly balanced occlusion on a partial case like this, but you can check for it and see if there's any interferences. Um, And then once you do that, what I usually will do is I'll take the morphing tool and I'll come in here, and any areas where I'm getting like really, really heavy marks and I'm trying to balance this out, I will come in here and I will push those areas down. So I'm going to hide all of my stuff here, and then I'm going to reset this back. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to push some of these areas down where I saw the markings. And then I'll go right back into my virtual articulator. And I'm going to go right back over to the same side. Now, what you're going to start to notice is, see, I've got a custom contact there, and now I've got one here. And then if I go over to the other side, I've got custom contacts on there. So just by making those few little movements, I've got that side worked out. So now I'm going to go the opposite way. And I'm going to take a look at how everything looks on this side. So with the teeth that I have any kind of power over, you can see I've got some markings here. So I might have a little bit of an interference back there. So I'll go in here with my morphing tool. Push this cusp down a little bit. And then I'll bring back in the virtual articulator. And I'll go right back over to that same side. And you can see it closed down quite a bit just by fixing that one interference. So this is typically how I adjust my bites. Now, if I was doing stuff in the anterior, I would also run through protrusive and retrusive. But since I'm just doing lateral excursions on a bunch of posterior teeth, I really don't feel the need to go through the protrusive and retrusive because I have no control over any of the anterior teeth. So if they're riding up too much, I can't control that. So I'm not going to worry about that. So this looks pretty good. One of the things you're going to want to watch for are these green lines around these teeth. You want them to not be penetrating into the scan. So this one here is the closest. So if that one were an issue, one of the things I could do here is come to my my individual setup tool there, and I could just shorten the tooth a little bit to get it away. I'll shorten this one a little bit to be proportionate. And then now I've got it away from that tooth more. So that should be enough. Um, so now I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. So I'm going to go next. This will come up if I have any of those green lines closer to the scan than 2 millimeters, which of course I do, because you've got the areas right next to the natural teeth that's closer to the scan. So you can always just hit yes here. It's not an error that you can't get past. And then here I've got my my borders brought back in. So I can see I'm extended quite a bit past here. So you can adjust these in to shorten these saddle areas if you'd like. So I can shorten mine up a little bit. And then I can make any adjustments to clasping areas or anything like that I want. If I want to, narrow up these clasps a little, I can do that. Then once I'm satisfied with what I've got here, I'll go ahead and hit next. Keep in mind, base thickness for flexibles here is going to be 2 millimeters. And then also you'll want to set your gingival aesthetics. So I have pre-programmed ones I'm going to use here. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the soft final, and then I'll go next. This is going to generate my gingival base for me. And if I get any errors here, it's usually because of the placement of the outline. So we'll just have to watch for that. We might have to make some adjustments here. All right, so no errors. Generated out decently nice here. So obviously we're gonna have some sculpting to do. Usually it's always around the natural teeth that we have some issues, so we'll fix those. So right now we're in our connector step. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit next here. There's really nothing that you want to change here if you use the right material file. So we'll go ahead and hit next again. And all that's doing is it's generating out the connectors in between each individual tooth. So here we've got our teeth. I talked earlier about equilibration and making sure that we adjust these. We left those blue spots on purpose here. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the little contacts and smoothing button here. Oh shit. All right, so now we're in our sculpt step. So earlier I talked about how we could adjust the teeth and equilibrate them here. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here to our sculpt toolkit, and we're going to select the contacts and smoothing button here. This top one is going to allow us to cut the teeth to the opposing. So those little blue spots we left were actually high spots in the teeth. So now we're going to cut those at 0. So if I zoom in on the arch that's selected, so you can see that up here at the top left, and hit the apply button, you'll see it slightly adjust those teeth. And then I'll hit next, and it'll take me to the other segment of teeth, and I'll be able to do the same thing there. And it will adjust those teeth. So now my teeth are all equilibrated to each other. So if I bring back in the virtual articulator here, I can verify that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my lateral movements again, and I'm just going to slightly move the teeth. And now you're going to see some lighter contacts, which is good. But I should have contacts across all the teeth, which for the most part, I do here. Now, I can turn off my opposing and I can take a look and see where I've got the real heavy contacts. And I can go back to these morphing tools and adjust those. So, for example, um, I can come right here, push this down a little bit more, push these spots down a little bit more, and then I can go back to my virtual articulator and do my same functional movement and see what I've got. And now I've got really, really close to balanced on that side. So now we're just going to roll it over to the other side. And so we kind of have the same thing going on this side that we did before. We've got a heavy contact right here that's probably discluding everything a little bit too much. So yeah, we're slightly out on the other side. So if I adjust in that spot, I should be able to get the occlusal relationship I want. So let me do that real quick. And now I'm going to come back here, go back to that spot. And now I've got my nice light contacts over there. And I've got some working occlusion over here. All right, so I'm going to close out of that. And now that's really all I do here. So I'll go next. And then when this comes up, you'll notice that you get all this red on here. That's the minimum thickness tool. The problem with it is that it believes that the entire base should be all the same thickness, which is untrue here, especially for a partial. So I'm going to just turn that off. So I want my clasps to be a little bit thinner than the rest of the base. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to smooth those up a little bit. And that will naturally just kind of thin those out some. And it'll give them a little bit better shape, which is what I want to see. Now, anytime you bring stuff to a point, you will get this kind of going on here in 3Shape, which you can get around that by just coming in here and adding some material back, and it'll give you that nice point that you were looking for. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to smooth the border areas. So I don't like that big ledge that it gives me. So I don't need all this extra, fatness around my borders. That's just going to be something that the patient complains about. So I'm going to smooth those down and get those out of the way, nice and blended. All right. Then I'll go around to this side and do it. All right, so we're already looking pretty nice here. And then I'm just going to kind of generally go around and look at everything. I'm going to turn off my opposing. So I got some issues going on here. So I'm going to go to my smoothing tool. And I'm just going to kind of blend up these areas a little bit. Patient's not going to like these super thick borders right around the teeth like this. So I want to make sure I blend those down and in. And it's okay to do that on these just because, these areas, they have to be thin. Otherwise, the patient's going to feel that ledge and then they're not going to be happy with it. And you're going to have to remake it. And nobody wants to do that. So Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a little bit to the points. I want those to be nice and strong and in there. And then you can see here I smoothed out this a little bit, so I want to bring this back up so this tooth has some retention in the pocket. I want as much retention as possible between the base and the teeth because it is a flexible. So, you've got a rigid tooth that's trying to flex inside of a partial, and, a lot of times that doesn't happen. They just pop out. The advantage to doing these digitally is that we are bridging the teeth together. So there's less likely a chance that any one tooth is going to pop out, especially if you do the bonding process properly, which we're going to go over after we print and post process. So I'm just going to sculpt all this in. I don't want to see any real indentations here, so I'm going to sculpt it with the add tool. It's going to get kind of lumpy, and then I'm just going to come back in here with the smoothing tool and blend it all, smooth it out. Get rid of all the lumps. And then you can adjust your anatomy if you'd like to. Sometimes these gingival margins can get a little bulbous, so I'll blend those in a little bit. Typically, you'll find most of the issues with the way that the gingiva anatomy generates right next to where the natural teeth are. So you can see this tooth kind of looks a little weird. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to sculpt in a little bit of anatomy around this tooth and kind of shape up this gingival margin some. So I'm going to use my add tool. And I'm just going to make a little bit of a gingival margin there to kind of match everything else. And then I'm also going to go in here. I like to add up the papillas a little because when it cuts the pockets, it's going to cut these papillas down quite a bit. And I want to make sure that I have a place for my bonding agent to run up the pocket and fill those papillas in so that I don't see these bridge connectors in between the teeth. So I'm going to go around and check for any uh, concave areas here where um, food can get trapped and plaque can get trapped on them. And here we go. I'll come back and smooth some of this a little bit more. The worst thing you can do to your patient is give them a spot where there's an indentation. Their tongue's going to immediately go there every time they wear it, and it's going to be a pain point for them because it's uncomfortable or their tongue's always attracted to it. I'll most likely do some work on these clasps too after I printed and bonded the teeth in because this one's a little big still, but I like to check the retention first. But overall, I think this looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and go next. One other thing before we go next that I sometimes will do on these is if it's a nice big horseshoe shape, um, I will put a support bar in here. So I'll take and I'll kind of line this up from a side view, and depending on how tall it is, I'll do one or two support bars. In this case, I'm probably going to do two on here. So I look from this side and place them, and then I'm going to look from like more of an occlusal view. I'm just going to drag them over to the other side. And then I like to put one down kind of low. And I'll stretch it across. And you want to make sure that these don't penetrate on the inside because it will leave those there. So you want to make sure that they don't come out the inside there. And then the other one, I'm going to place up more towards the top. And I'll slide it over and adjust it there. All right. So now that I've got those positioned where I want them, I'll go ahead and hit apply. I have gotten some questions about putting names in these, which you can do. I just get a little concerned because you have to backfill those with something. If that material is really rigid, it can affect the flexibility of the partial. So I usually don't do it. So I'm going to go next. And now the coupling mechanism is going to edit the teeth. So you can see how I've got some teeth popping through here. When I go ahead and hit next, it's going to change the shape of the bottoms of those teeth and eliminate as much of that as it can right here. So now you can see that the teeth are edited to be a little bit more passive. And then on this step, what we're going to do is we're going to generate the pockets where the teeth go. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next here and let it generate those. And depending on how many teeth you have on the partial, this could take a little longer. So I've done some one tooth flippers here that have been really quick and generated within a few seconds. This one's probably going to take a minute because it's got 6 teeth, so it's got to generate a pocket for each of those teeth. You'll notice that the settings here that I've got, I use those settings. I actually created the material file for this. So those are the settings I use to produce these. And you'll get some pretty good results from them. All right, so our pockets have generated now, and our design is finished. So now we can go ahead and close this out and generate the STL files. So this is what it kind of looks like before we do that. And then if I hide the base a little bit, you can kind of see in here where the spacer for your bonding agent goes all the way down and around the teeth. This is why I like to build up the papillas because you can see it has shrunk it back quite a bit from where it was. It was up here. Now it's down there. So that's why I build the papillas up a little bit. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to hit close. It's going to take us back out to our dental manager and we'll get our designed icon here. Looks like the tooth. And then what we'll do is we'll generate the STLs for the case. And then we'll take it to our print software, Asiga Composer, and we'll go ahead and nest these. So in order to generate the STLs, you can right click on the case, go down to advanced, go to generate cam output here, or you can hit F7 with the case selected on the keyboard, and that will also generate it. So I'm going to hit generate cam output there. And now we're going to go into our Asiga Composer software and nest those. All right, so let's talk about nesting these flexible partials. So I'm going to use my Asiga Composer software here to go ahead and nest these. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to start here by opening a new job. And my printers should show up here in this box. If not, you want to make sure they're powered on. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my first printer that I want to use. So I'm going to use this printer, and I'm going to go ahead and select the DTEX denture flexible material here. 100 microns is fine for that layer thickness on these. And then I'm going to go ahead and select OK. Once that happens, it'll open up my build platform here, and I'm just going to navigate to my files. So you'll see this little workflow bar here on the left-hand side. That's how you're going to pull up all of your files and nest them and put supports and everything like that on them. So let's go ahead and start here with the first icon. This is Add Parts, and then we're going to go to Select Files. This is going to pull up here, and we're going to just navigate to our desktop. And this is where I have my files selected or saved. You may have yours in a different location, but I'm going to go in here to this folder. And then the trick to this is if I pull this little name box over a little bit more, I can actually see the file names here. So the monoblock is going to be the file that has the teeth and the base all in one file together. So if you were trying to do a try-in on these, that's what you would select. All the files are going to be just numbered. So it's going to be basically your order ID number, and then underscore 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So to figure out which ones are which, the easiest way to do that is to scroll this little bar over and find your sizes of your files here. So the biggest one's going to be your monoblock. The next biggest one is going to be your base. And then the other two smaller ones will be the teeth. Now, the amount of teeth segments or files that you get varies on how many teeth are in the partial and things like that. Mine had 2, so I have 2 files for the teeth because I had actually 6 teeth, but they were bridged together in 2 segments. So I have 1 file for each of those segments, and then I have this one here for my base. So that's the one I'm going to select and hit open. And then you'll see here the orientation is showing me denture partial. So when I hit open here, it's going to bring it in and kind of orient it for me. This is the orientation that I like. They seem to print just fine in this orientation, and it's going to give me more supports. So the next spot I'm going to go to here is I'm actually going to move down to 3 icons here and go to the generate support, and then I'm going to hit apply. So you'll see that it puts some supports on here. Now, obviously, this is not enough supports. It's going to fail if I leave it like this. So then I have to go here to advanced. And then at the very bottom here, I'm going to go to add. Now, if you're having trouble with failed prints with these things, one of the things that you'll want to do is you'll want to come up here to contact width and increase this by 200 microns. So typically when a vendor creates their material files for the Asiga software, they do everything as low as possible to get it to print. Now, sometimes they always print, sometimes you have failures. So if you're seeing failures where the teeth, the supports are all printed, but the object itself is not, and it's like right at that area where the supports are not printed or where the supports end, then that means that the contact width at the object or at the partial is too small. So you need to increase that. So if you have failed prints, you'll want to increase this value here. I also like to use the tallest support here and 8 millimeters. What that does is it keeps it from putting supports in the fit surface of the partial. You never want those in there unless it absolutely has to, which if it does, you'll see some. So like these two, these are going to be fine. I just don't like the whole inside filled with supports because it can be a pain to remove all those and also to finish it. You'll sacrifice some of the fit for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. So up at the top here, you have some extra tools. I'm going to use this one here. So this is the top bottom view. So I'm going to hit it once. It'll take me to the top view. And then I'll hit it again and it'll take me to a direct bottom view. This is going to be the view that I use to place my supports. So usually what I do is I'll start over here and I'll start kind of at the back and I'll just start adding them. I like to slightly overlap the new ones that I place, so so that they have a stronger base. So basically, overlapping them is not overlapping the supports at the actual partial; it's actually overlapping them at the base where they connect to the build platform. So it kind of groups them together and creates this nice, strong um, base at the bottom so that these supports don't shift as easily as they would if they were separated or spread out. So I'm just going to go around it here, and I like to place them as close to the border as I can, either to the inside or the outside of it. Um, this is the easiest way to do this and finish it because you can actually maintain the border area if you um, finish these cautiously. So, and we'll get to that when we get to the finishing portion of the video, but um, I'm just going to go around here and I'm going to place my supports all the way around the borders. Now, sometimes as you're doing this, you'll get some errors. The most common one that I get is it cannot place support column. The easiest way to get around that, so what'll happen is you'll click and you'll move it around and you still can't get it to place, and you'll keep getting that error. The easiest way to bypass that is to just close out of the support box and reopen it, and it will then allow you to place supports manually. It's kind of a weird error that I get from time to time in the software. Um, so you can see now I've got my supports all the way around the border here, except for down on this side. So now the question is, where do I place the supports here? So this is how I do it. I like to go in here along these festooned areas. I try to place a support on each of the areas that go into the interproximals, just because sometimes these areas like to fail a little bit. And then once I've placed them all, then I'll kind of interconnect some supports uh, back here. The reason that, like I said, I like to do that is I want to maintain those points that go into the interproximals. Um, and then I'll come up back up here on the border and continue around. All right. So now, once I've got them all the way around the border, I do like to support the T-bars or these support bars as well. Just because if I don't, sometimes they'll warp a little bit. You don't need as many supports on these as you do going around the border. So I kind of spread them out. 4 to 5 on each bar is perfectly fine, just like that. And then once I'm done with my supports, I'll close this box out and I like to center my object. So I'm going to left click on it and grab it and drag it into the center here. And then from here, I'm ready to start the print job. So I'm going to go here to this big printer icon and I'm going to name my print or my build here. So this is going to be Dtex Flexible Base. I use fast print mode and separation detection. It seems to work just fine when I print them. So I'm going to hit next here. Um, if you get a lot of failures where nothing is stuck to the build platform at all, and you've done your Z-axis calibration, you reset the position encoders. One of the other things that you can do to help it stick is turn on the base plate here. So it's usually on as a shadow here by default, which means it's going to put a base plate kind of in the outline of the object. You can also change it to full, and it's going to do a base plate over the full build platform, which will help a little bit with the adhesion of the object to the build platform. I wouldn't recommend it on every build, but if you have one that fails, when you go to resend it over, try adding that. Another trick that I do, so one of the nice things about Asiga's Composer software is it does have the ability to have these tabs open for different build jobs. So I never close out of my builds until they print successfully and I've done my post process. The reason for that is if I go and close out of it and it fails, I have to re-nest the whole thing, which is a pain. So rather than doing that, I just leave the tab open and then I start another new job if I have to nest other objects. So here I'm going to do the print, and that's going to create the build, make all the slices, and then it's going to send it over to the printer. So that has sent. So now, like I said, I don't like to close out of any builds that I haven't printed and post-processed yet. Because when I say post-process, I do like to post-process it first because when you pull it off of the build platform, it's got a lot of excess resin on it. It's really hard to see, if it printed properly. So I make sure I clean it, take off all the build supports, and then inspect it after I do my alcohol washes with it. That way, once I've done that and I can verify that it doesn't look like it's warped or failed in any areas, then I can close out of the build. So because this hasn't printed yet, I'm just going to go up here to New Build. And now I need to select a different printer. I always have at least two printers running all of my removables work, whether it's full dentures, partial dentures, just because I can print the teeth and the base all at one time, and that saves me extra time. So if some of these are an hour to 2 hours prints. So if I stack them on one printer, that means I'm waiting almost double the amount of time to get these off. But if I have two printers, I can run the teeth and the base on separate printers, and then they come off the printers faster, and I can get these pushed out fast. So now I'm going to choose the other printer here, and I'm going to go here to the free print crown and select it. I've done this in the 050, or you can also do it in higher values if you want. It really doesn't. The only thing you're saving is time. But you also have to think, the bases typically take longer to print. So usually when you get these printed out, you're about the same amount of time. So it doesn't matter there. I'm going to go ahead and add my objects here, select the files, and now I'm going to select my other two. So you can highlight them both. Windows keys work fine here, so you can hold Control and click on each one. You can hold Shift and click on all the first or to the last one. It makes no difference how you select them. You can left click and drag and select them. Anything's fine there. So now I'm going to hit Open here, and you're going to see in the orientation it's going to say denture teeth. So I'm going to hit Open again, and it's going to bring them in. So where the partial bases came in perfect with no issues, the denture teeth tend to have not quite the right orientation. So what I'm going to do here is I like to kind of make them parallel with the long side of the build platform. So I'll rotate them this way a little, and then I'll look at them from a front or a back view, and I want to try to get all the necks down as close to the build platform as I can. And then I'll left click and drag it down. So then I'll flip this around and I'll look at my other segment. I'm going to rotate this side down a little bit and drag it down. The last thing I'm going to do here is I like to get this flat area, the basal, right against the build platform. So I'm going to tip this back until it looks like it's kind of parallel with the build platform, and then I'm going to drop it down. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the other segment, get it kind of parallel, and then drag it down. Now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to apply my supports here. So I'm going to hit Apply. And where the base I had to go in there and add supports, these will print just fine this way. So I don't need to add any. So that's all I need to do here. I am going to move these just like the bases into the center. so that they're right there in the middle of the build platform. And now I'm ready to send it over to my printer. So I'm going to open the print, and then I'm going to name it. And the shade I'm going to use here is A2. And then I'm going to hit next. And we're going to go ahead and hit print. Kind of the same rules apply here. Fast print mode, separation detection, I have those all turned on. So you're going to see that these are going to take a little longer to print. Sometimes as it prints, it reduces down the build time. So the way that the Asiga composer guesstimates the time for the print is based on the previous job. So if the previous job transversed a bunch of layers or waited the 300 or 600 seconds and then gave you that approach failure, that's going to increase the time of this build. So a lot of times what happens is if it builds and it's going fine, it will actually speed up that build time and it won't take that full 2 hours. So I'm not concerned about the build time that it gives me here. It will probably print a lot faster than that. So now we're going to go to our printer and we're going to go ahead and start the build. All right, so now that we've nested our prints and sent them over to the printer, we're going to go ahead and load the printer. So in order to do that, here's how we're going to handle that. So I've already gone and I've loaded up my tray with the resin here. So you can see it's in there. These cases are really handy that Asiga makes for their resin trays. So you can see there's some labeling on there that allows me to put things like the name of the resin, the shade, the lot number, the expiration date, all that kind of stuff on there. They're also really nice because they're black, so they block the ambient light. So I can store them in here and feel comfortable enough knowing that the resin's not going to go bad really fast or start to cure in the tray. So here is what our build platform looks like. So we're going to go ahead and put this in. So there's one little retention knob up here that holds it in place. So I'm going to put this back on here, tighten down my retention knob, and then I'm going to go ahead and place my tray in. So here's my tray. Outside of the container, you'll notice that there's an RFID tag here, this white label. That has to go to the back right corner of the printer, and then you'll want to latch it down with these handles that are on the sides. Now, the newer Maxes have different handles, so it could be a little different. Those are slide locks, where these are lift and pull in, and then there's little washers on each of the corners here that hold the tray down in place. So now that I've got it loaded up here, I'm going to go ahead and close my lid. And then I'm going to go down here to my menu and start the print job. So there's my print there. I'm going to go ahead and say continue, and then it's going to start the process here. And what you'll see is that it's going to, sometimes it'll do like a temperature check to make sure that it gets up to the right temperature, and then it'll start. So we're going to go ahead and let this print, and then we'll come back and do the post process together. All right, so now our prints are done. So we're going to take them off of the printer and we're going to post process them. So I'm going to show you the removal from the printer first, and then I will show you how I transport them. So first, what I like to use is a simple tray. It's like a lunch tray with a paper towel on it. That's going to absorb any excess material. And then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it off. So this is for the base. I'm going to pull this base off. So I'm going to loosen this. I'm going to pull off the base here, and you can see right here that the base adhered to the build platform just fine. You can see all the supports are intact. Nothing is lifted off of the build platform, which is what I want to see. Next, we're going to pull off the teeth from the other printer. So with this other, with the teeth here, we're going to do this a little differently, just because I want to preserve some of this excess resin that's sitting on the build platform. Um, this material is much more viscous than the base material was, so I want to make sure that I try to get some of this back in the tray because it does puddle and it does stick. So I'm going to pull this off of here, and then I'm also going to release the tray and pull it off of here. And I'll set it on my tray here, and I'm just going to take a normal business card and I'm going to scrape it, all the excess, back into the tray. This is also why I like to cluster my teeth in one spot so that I can get a lot of this excess um, resin back into the tray, because this tooth material is typically the most expensive part. So if I waste any of this, it's going to cost quite a bit more. So I want to take this tray, or take all this excess resin off of here. And all I'm doing is I'm just kind of scraping it off the build platform and letting it fall back into the resin tray until I get, for the most part, most of it off of here. All right. So once I've done that, I'm now done with the tray. So I'll set that to the side, set my other build platform on here, and now we're going to go over and do our post process. All right, so now my alcohol baths are done. So I'm going to pull these out of the alcohol here, or the ultrasonic here, and we're going to dump our excess. So the way that I dispose of mine is I always keep the previous bottle of alcohol that I used up, and I put this filter system on it. So it's just a funnel and a mesh grate here that I just stack on top of each other. And I put this in here, and then I'll take my alcohol out of my containers and I'll dump it. The reason I put this mesh piece on here is so that when I dump, I can just dump everything into it, and those will drain without running the risk of my teeth segments falling down into the bottle. So now I'll do my base. Sometimes these guys can be a little finicky when when your hands are wet. So if that's the case, I'll use a paper towel and I'll just grab it that way. So I'll dump this through here. Now I'm going to pull them out. What I'm going to do is, at this point, you can see how they're nice and shiny still. So what I want to end up with is a matte finish. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put some excess alcohol in here, and I'm going to use a brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to air dry this first. Then if there's any shiny spots left, I'm going to take it and brush it with alcohol and continue to dry it back and forth. So I'm going to come back after I get it nice and matte, and then I'll show you the end result. So that's what it looks like when it's shiny. And here's what it looks like when it's nice and matte finish. So There is a little bit of shine to it, but it's very dull, very matte. There's no super shiny spots to it. And then the same thing with the tooth segments. So you can see that this one's nice and matte, no super shiny spots. That's what you want to see. So now that I've got these post-processed and ready, we're going to go and do the fitting, finishing a little bit, and then we're going to bond them. All right, so now that we've post-processed our denture bases here, our denture base and our teeth, now we need to fit them. So the teeth need to fit into the pockets. Um, there's a lot of little nubs on the bottom here that we'll need to finish off. So I usually use a combination of a couple burrs here to do this. So this first one's just a normal carbide burr. I like it a little smaller. Just because it can get into some of these interproximal areas on the teeth. And then I also use this burr here, or this wheel here. This is from Wagner. This is the packaging for it. So um, it's the fine setting, so it doesn't scratch, leave scratch marks. It's a flex wheel. So I really like this one. It's nice. It's not super aggressive, and it just does a really good job. Anytime I handle these before they're final cured, I always wear gloves. So you'll notice I'm still, wearing gloves here. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on this. So I'm going to start off with the wheel here. And I'm just going to go in here and start taking off these nubs. And so all I'm doing is rotating it and looking from different angles so that I can try to track down any of the little support nubs that are still left on here. Um, so I got a few kind of in the interproximal area, so I'm going to switch to my carbide and go in there. You don't need to be real aggressive with this because this material before it's cured is nice and soft. So these things will come off real easily. So there is a risk that you run of over contouring the underside. So always make sure that you're just careful with it. Once you think you've got it, that's when you want to start the test fit process. So you want to put it under here and then you're going to want to do the rock test. So you want to put it in here and make sure that it doesn't rock back and forth, which this one actually sits in here nice and solid. So I'm happy with this one. So we're going to move into the other tooth segment and get these nubs off. So now I'll test fit this side. That fits in there really nice. So the last thing I have to do is I need to finish up the borders here and get rid of all the nubs that are on here and then any little areas where I've got support still. So this one, most importantly, I'm going to go back to my wheel here. And I actually have one that's pretty well worn down. This is for getting into tighter areas like in here where I've got the clasp. If I try to go in there with this big wheel, I'm going to hit the clasp and get that off. And then if it's a really, really tight area, I'll go back to my carbide and get those. But I always like to keep my old one just so I have it there. So I'm going to go and run through this. And this material is also really soft. So you don't need to be super aggressive with pressure or anything like that. I always keep my handpiece at about half speed, sometimes a little less than half, so that I can make sure that I don't over finish any of these areas. And if you're worried about, over finishing your borders, you can always slightly overextend them in the design. And then when you're here, you can finish them back to where you want them once you get these support nubs finished off. A lot of newer users will do that just to, be sure that they're not over finishing their connectors here. Now I'm going to switch to my carbide and get in here and get some of these harder to reach ones. All right. So now that I've got those all finished, this is kind of what my border or my base looks like. The borders are pretty well finished. Might touch a few little areas here. Um, Kind of looking around for any little nubs that I can see from the connectors. right. That looks good. All right, so now everything's test fit. Everything is finished. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and clean these up, um, and then I'm going to start the bonding process. All right, so now I've fitted the teeth into the base. So we're ready to actually do the bonding process now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the denture base material, the resin itself, to bond these in. So I'm going to take just a normal micro brush here, and I'm going to fill the pockets with the base material. So I'm going to start doing that here. And I'm just going to drop it in. Like this. And then once I get all the pockets decently filled, I'm going to take my tooth segment and I'm going to press it down in here. It's really important that you hold it with your thumb and index finger. And then I'm going to take a second clean micro brush and I'm going to grab and pull away the excess. And what this is going to do is it's going to kind of fill in all the little air pockets between the teeth and the base. And the cleaning is going to obviously get rid of all the excess. Okay, so I've got the front kind of where I want it. So I'm going to use a tack light. I'm just going to hold it under here for about 20 seconds, and that will tack the front. And then I'm just going to flip it around and clean up the back side. That's good there. And then I'll take again, my clean micro brush, and I'll just go along the back here. And clean up the excess, and then I'll tack cure it again. All right, so that segment is done. Now I need to do the other side. So I'm going to do the same concept here. Just fill up these pockets. All right. Now I'm going to press my tooth segment in here. I'm going to put pressure on it and hold it. I'm going to clean up. All right, and I'm going to tap cure. Okay, now I'll clean up the lingual. And then one of the last things I like to do is I like to take a paper towel and I like to kind of clean up around the base as much as I can to get some of the excess off that way as well, especially down in the central grooves of the teeth. Um, Sometimes, if you put too much on there, it can get a little heavy. So now that's all done. I'm going to tack cure the lingual. All right. So now I'm ready to go put this in my cure box. I'm going to cure it for 2,000 flashes twice. Um, and I will, yeah. So now that I've got the tooth segments tacked in place, before I go bond it, what I like to do is I like to take a little bit of this rodent glaze. It's a great product from PacDent, and I like to paint it over the teeth. The reason I do that is because it seals in the teeth and keeps them from decoloring and getting damaged as quickly over time. So I use these disposable brushes. You can get them on Amazon for there's like a 200 pack that you can get for like 10 or 15 bucks. But it's this material is really nice because it'll help fill in any little crevices or things that you might have missed with the bonding agent. So I just use one of these little disposable thimble things um, and put some of it in here. That way I don't waste a whole lot because this stuff can get pretty pricey depending on what glaze material you decide to go with. I like like I said, the rodent glaze, but others will work. You could use the Dentsply Total 3, um, or the Vita makes a glaze. Pretty much any real composite glaze would work. Um, you just got to be real careful because some of them will gray the teeth a little bit. So you can see it's made these nice and shiny. So I'm going to now take it and put it under my tack light and tack that side in place. All right. And then I'm going to do the other segment here. And I do this over the entire teeth all the way down to the gingival margin. That way I know that they're nice and sealed. If I get a little excess on the base, that's fine. When I go and I do my finishing steps here, I like to pumice and polish these. I'll be able to, blend that area. This will also save me from having to blend and do the teeth. All right. So now I'm going to take this to my cure box and we'll do the final cure on it. So now that we've placed our teeth into the pockets with the bonding agent, we're going to go ahead and put it in the cure box to cure it. So what we're going to use is the auto flash here. This is from NK Optics. This is actually the old version. They did come out with two new versions that are validated for the material. Uh, so I'm going to flip this on. I'm also going to set my flashes. So we're going to do 2,000 flashes 2 times. The first time we're going to put it in, we're going to put it in with the buckle facing the back of the machine. The second time we're going to do it facing the front of the machine. Um, and so I'm going to go ahead and put my 2,000 flashes in. I'm going to open the chamber. I'm going to drop this in here just like that. Close the chamber, turn on my gas, and go ahead and hit start. So once it finishes the flashes, then I'll flip it around to face the front, and then I'll do 2,000 flashes again, and then from there we'll finish it. So we'll come back once this cure box is done, and we'll go ahead and start the finishing. All right, so now our base has come out of the cure box with the teeth in it. It's ready to have all these supports cut off, and then we'll go and pumice and polish it. So I'm going to start off by grabbing just a simple disc and doing the cutoff process. So um, I like to use a smaller disc, something about like this with a little thickness to it. Um, and then I always put a finger over the backside so that if this thing catches, it won't fling it towards me. And then you have to be real careful too, because once this gets about 3/4 of the way down, it's going to want to catch on you and start flinging the disc around. So just be careful of that. I usually get them about 3/4 of the way, and then I just kind of break the rest of the way off. So this material comes apart real nice and easy. And don't worry if you can't get super close to the base like I couldn't there. Um, the when I finish these down, they'll finish off real nice. So I got all those off. So I'm going to switch back to my Wagner wheel. So this guy here. And this is going to let me finish these down the rest of the way. So I'll turn my speed down, and I'll be able to blend these guys really nicely into the base with minimal scratching. And that's just going to help me with the finishing end of it too. So I kind of feel for any ledges or indentations or anything like that as I'm doing this. And if you're worried about the longevity of this disc burr, it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't wear down super fast, but you could also take a carbide and knock these down really close and then use this. That would also work. You'll also notice I'm not wearing gloves now. That's because the material's been final cured. So it's no longer toxic to contact the skin. It's just now can be treated as a normal appliance. And now I'm just kind of going around it, looking for any areas where I didn't get these quite finished off enough. Doing the field test, making sure that I don't have any indentations or scratches or anything like that in the surface. Right. I can also use this time to finish and smooth down these borders. I can finish down these areas behind the linguals of the teeth and get them a little thinned out. Any areas here in the lingual borders, I can thin all these areas down and get them closer to what ideal would be before I go and pumice and polish it. So I'm going to go ahead and take it now and do the pumice and polish. And then once I pumice and polish it, I'll bring it back and show you guys the end result. All right, so here it is, pumiced and polished and ready to be delivered. I was able to get it nice and shined up. So basically, all I used was a little, obviously normal pumice in a lathe with a normal rag wheel, and then I used a red rouge uh, to polish it real nice. And then after I did the red rouge, it's got a lot of that still on it. So then I take it and put it in an ultrasonic bath for about 20 minutes, and that got all of that off. So now it's ready, like I said, for delivery. And the moment of truth, look at that flexibility in the partial. So it's really just a great material. I'm really happy that DTAX came out with this, and I'm excited to use it on some live cases. So if you guys have any questions, I'll have my contact info at the end of this video, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.